है
आ रहा है मेरे यहाँ तो जूम में आ रहा है ini kan ada मान्छे ग्रुप सँगै हिँड्छौँ हेर्नु हेर्नु भने
राजु भाइ
ढुङ्गा हाल्ने हो ढुङ्गाले भन्छ बुढी त ए आयो 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 निकै आयो त भन्छ बुढी त दाजु बुढीले गरे आउँछ नि त वेट जति बढी छ त्यो छिटो आउँछ
होइन यता घुम्यो नि त अगाडि आएपछि यसो गएको होइन अझै बाटोमा
मजा आयो
मजा आयो
पानी सबै अझै गरेर हुनु नि
कहिले गर्छ हिँडेर कहाँ माथि जानुपर्छ
ए पेमङ ल ल ए भोलि कसो गर्नु मैले डिस्टर्ब साउन्डै जाँदैन म जाँदैन साउन्ड जान्छ भिडियो
सुनेको मैले नै बुझेको गीत गाउन सुनाएँ अनि तपाईहरु दर्शकहरूले हेरेर रमाइलो हुन्छ त्यसैले म अब तिमीले बुझेको गीत गाउँ के गाउँदै म यस्तो मिठो गीत गाउने भनेर म यस्तो गीत गाउँछु जुन तिम्रो कुरा आउँदैन चार शब्द बजारमा माया पछि कन्छीको मोहरमा बनी खासक बजारमा माया पछि मोहरमा के गारो मन भयो दरमा मन भयो मेरो दरमा कुल्फी आयो खाना पनि मिले नास्ता पनि मिले आयो कुल्फी आयो कुल्फी आयो पनि पाउने लाउने मध्यरातमा सबैमा आउने यो केटीलाई
लाई मके भनो
अब यता राइज
निकै जोसमा आए निकै जोसमा आए निकै जोसमा
छेक्यो देउराली डाँडा उसुरो हिरोले छाडेर कहिले चराइनी मायाको दुईरोले
ज्यालैमा बसेर जिस्काउनु पर्दैन
छेक्यो छेक्यो देउराली डाँडा उसुरो हिरोले छाडे पानी मायाको हिरोले
लाइको चामबाट डराउने भुटेको मकै नखाने जालैमा भइसक्यो हामीले गएर
मनको मान्छेलाई घुमाउन काठमाडौँ सहर
रातो टिका निधारमा टल्कियो माया गर्ने झुल्कियो ए बिजुलीको तार 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 ए फुर्सद छैन मामालो मेरो शनिबार मिल्छ मिल्छ ऋतुहरूमा तिमी हरियाली बसन्त हौ ऋतुहरूमा तिमी हरियाली बसन्त हौ अनि त्यहाँ त हामीलाई थाहा छैन ना 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 भर्खर हामी गएको नि यो त नि त्यही हो त भर्खर हामी गएको नि अनि थाहा दिनु पर्ने साथीहरूले ओइ कहाँ भर्खर हामी गएको ऊबाट आएको ऊबाट हामीले के त थपिनु पर्यो त आफूले हाबाट ठिकै छ नि अनि गाउने रे नि गाउने हरियो माथि हेलो जोते साथी हामीले हाम्रो पालो हो नि त हाम्रो पालो हो नि हाम्रो पालोमा गएको नि त उसले
कहीं तुम छुपा लो हम अकेले हो न जाए दूर तुमसे हो न जाए पास आओ गले से लगा लो मुकाला मुकाबिला होगा
हैन
लालु पत्ते फुल्यो बनैमा
कहिले गालाको लालीले कहिले मिठो बोलीले ल ल ल फेरि गाउँछु भाइ ल भनेको बिचबाट भयो त यो अन्तरा भयो क्या अन्तरा भयो क्या यो भन के उदैछ त हो त्यसो भए त माथि को छु नि दुईजना यहाँ छ त म यहाँ के सबै गाइदिने हामी नगाउनु रबर सुन सहेली सहेली साबर अन्त सहेली भने तिमीले भन नि टाब्रो टाढा टु भने एउटा टे भने एउटा हो नि एउटा हो नि ए टस्दी लगाएर उद्या हो टस्दी लगाएर टु 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 तबाट कसरी टाकी टु टु 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yo, 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 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 20.
हान्नु पर्यो नि यहाँ लुकेर आउँदाखेरि हुन्छ
डर छेर त यही सुनौ
उठेर
लो डरले त जान्छ
गङ्गा बहिनी मान्छे सबै हान्छ डरले
भुइँमा बस्यो छ नि
उठेन त नि
गङ्गा त त्यहाँबाट निस्किँदैन ओ माइ गॉड आगिन यो चाहिँ के हो लुग्ने ठाउँ सिकेर राख्नुपर्छ भने
अब त्यहाँ को आउँछ मान्छेहरू सबै माथि खेल्दैछ पैसा तिरेको त्यही लुक्ने मात्रै गएको अरे 30 रुपियाँ तिरेर त्यही कुनामा बसिरहन्न अब त
ए उनीहरूको त हेर्ने रहेछ नि आमाले चाहिँ फेरि होला त्यता भन्छ
त्यही बसिरहनु पाउँदैन भने होला बसिरह्यो के भन्छ
जवाब दिएर बसिरहेछ काम
लाग्दैन उ त्यो छ जाली के भयो किन बिचरा बच्चा के भयो
त्यसको त आँखामा फुटेछ नि त भुइँमा बस्ने हाम्रो पासाङ होइन
उति पर हो होइन उति माथिको चाहिँ को रहेछ
मामा नि
ए मेरो छोरा त खै मान्छे देख्दैन चाहिँ के खेल्ने हो कहाँ गएछ र गङ्गा गोली चाहिँ अगाडि आयो अहिले सोध्छ है यो राइट अलग
त्यो गोली त त्यतिको त्यति हुन्छ चलाउनु पर्यो त्यो गोली त त्यहीबाट हान्नु न अलि देख्ने ठाउँमा होइन साथीलाई होइन उ त पारी हान्नु अनि यतातिर डुब्नु न उयातिर उयो ओरेन्ज
के छैन कोही पनि छैन दादा माथि दादा पापा
अर्को टिमको मान्छे
अर्को टिम उता आइपुग्यो भाइ
होइन अर्को तिनीहरू पनि दिएको टिममा हो हिँड्न जान्छ त यस्तो ब्लु बल हुन्छ
को गेले
गेली
होइन
त्यो दाइ होला भाइ
राजु
को यो फुचेले हाने खतरा
यसो हान्नुपर्छ यता हानेपछि हेर कन्टिन्यू हेर हानेको
अनि उठ्न दिनु भने क्या माथि माथि दिनु नि त अहिले भाइले देखेको छैन माथि गइसक्यो माथि को गेली माथि आउँदैछ यसले दिइहाल्छ नि यसले दिन्छ हेर खाली छ ओपन हो यसले देख्यो नि त्यसो त मरिहाल्छ
त्यो मर्छ नि त छिटो मर्छ
र त आउँदैन ल गेली हान छैन सक्यो त्यसो भए त किटी सिक्नु त्यहाँ बस्ने ठाउँ छैन काट्नु खाने त नि बिहेरमा खाँदो रहेछ किसन
अच्छा भयो ल भाइ
भाइ
राम्रो छ नि त भर्र गर्दैछ
In a quarter mile, turn left toward Bushkill Falls Road.
Look, there's a
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you.
My name is Joanne, and I'll be your guide this morning. I'd like to have your attention here at the map on the wall. So our museum has 6 rooms with relics and displays, and we're going to tell the story of the Delaware Indians. It's okay. Well, if she quiets down, he'd come back in with her. Yeah. Or if you have a bottle or something. Okay, so this is called the Map of Migration, and archaeologists believe that as early as 32,000 BC, man could have crossed the Bering Strait, which is a waterway that froze over. And these first men came from the lower tip of Russia across the Bering Straits into our state of Alaska. And the reason these men were wandering is these people were searching for food. And the animals that they hunted are now extinct, such as the woolly mammoth and the mastodon. Finally, by about 10,000 BC, the earliest Native Americans started to settle here in our state of Pennsylvania. Now I'd like to pick up the story here in the cave scene. The little guy you see here is called Paleolithic Man, and that means early or old. He survived on the animals that he was able to hunt down and kill, and he lived in caves or rock shelters similar to the one we see here. A real brief, I want to talk about a mastodon that was discovered here in the area, 2 miles south of the museum. It's across from Price Chopper by the Wendy's. There's a peat moss bog on the other side of the hill. And in 1968, a gentleman was digging up peat moss with a backhoe. And his bucket came up with a huge bone, and they knew it was too large to be a farm animal. Experts were brought in, and he, it turned out, discovered the complete petrified skeleton of a mastodon, which is now on display in the State Museum in Harrisburg, in Pennsylvania. So if you're ever lucky enough to visit Harrisburg, near the Capitol building is the Pennsylvania State Museum, and that mastodon is on display there. So when that animal was alive, that's when the earliest Native Americans looked like the little guy you see here, and he lives in caves or rock shelters. As time went on and man evolved, he learned how to create better weapons and tools. So now I'd like to pick up the story in the green display behind you. So if everyone would like to make a half circle around the green display, it's easier for everyone to see. And not to worry, for those of you that can't quite get a good look at the certain things while I'm talking about it. When I'm done speaking in a room, you're more than welcome to hang back and get a closer look at some of the items in the display. On the back wall, you'll see an Atlatl or spear thrower. This was one of the first levers. It was also the first Indian weapon. It was a spear. So by using the Atlatl, the Indian could double his thrusting power and hit an animal at about 50 yards away. And the Atlatl was made by using a hickory as the wooden part of the shaft there. And then they would use a handle on one end made out of antler or bone, and on the other end there's a hook made out of bone or antler, which fit into a notch at the end of the spear. So by using the Atlatl, the Indian was able to double his thrusting power and hit an animal at about 50 yards away. The shiny polished stone that you see in the center of the shaft was called a banner stone, and that was added for swing weight. To the left in the display, you'll see Ebola, which is another prehistoric weapon, simply rawhide strips with rocks tied on various ends, and it was swung in a circular motion around the Native American's head, and then he would whip it at, let's say, a flock of turkey. The Ebola would then entangle the bird's legs and wings, causing him to slow down, stumble, and then the Native American could close in and capture his meal for the day. On the back wall, you'll see a post mold. And I used to think the post mold was kind of boring, and why do they have it in the first display? Until I went to an archaeological dig site and actually saw post molds. It was really exciting at that point. A post mold was a pit dug in the ground that supported the posts that held up their bark homes. And years ago, when the natives were forced to leave the area, their lodges were burnt to the ground. The post then left a discoloration in the soil, which was a clue to archaeologists that there was once a village site in the area. So chances shrunk, and as the wood began to burn and char, the native would hammer away at it with his axe. So now your choice. We can all group together in the bark house, and I'll talk about it then, or we could walk through.
त्यो गर्छ नि भुइँको बनाउँछ नि ढुङ्गाहरू झट्टारो झट्टारो कि पट्टारो
You know, that's a good question. I'm wondering if they used a pillow or not. I'll have to find out. Is that everyone?
Yeah, everyone.
So this is the bark house. It was built to scale, so it's about the same size home that a Native American family would build to live in. This is a platform, and the Indian word for platform was hasoon. You guys can say that word?
Hasoon.
Very good. Very good. Sometimes they made them like bunk beds, so that they had storage space above and below. They never slept there because the cooking fire was constantly burning, and the smoke rose so slowly from the fire through the smoke hole in the ceiling that the natives always had a 2 or 3 foot layer of smoke ever present inside their home, which is why Native Americans sat cross-legged on the ground, Indian style. It wasn't really a custom or a tradition, it was out of necessity so that they would be beneath the smoke layer. And these homes are built by lashing saplings together with the inner bark of a basswood tree, or they used rawhide strips. So at the base of each sapling is a post mold. It's just a pit dug in the ground that supported the posts. Then they would layer sheets of elm or oak bark in a shingle fashion around the frame, and they would drill small holes in the bark with a stone drill that they made. And they would lash these shingles to the inner framework with the rawhide strips. So because of their poorly insulated homes, the Native Americans suffered from arthritis at early ages. And believe it or not, the average lifespan back then of a Native American was like 40 years old. 40 years old. Mm-hmm. Now, I'd like to have you move into the next room. Watch your step in the doorway. There's one small step up. Thanks, Maria.
Big circle. Make a big circle.
This is real. This is just like a drawing. And this is real.
So here you will see. Indian village. And as you're looking at that display, I'll explain where the Delaware Indians received the name Delaware. There were over 10,000 Delaware or Lenni Lenape Indians that lived throughout New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania years ago. And what happened to them is a very sad story. It's a story that's true for many North American Indian tribes. They were discovered by a gentleman who had a title, and his title was Lord Delaware. He discovered the Delaware Bay. So when he saw the natives living along the banks of the Delaware, he called them Delaware Indians. That's where they received the name Delaware. Their own name was Lenni Lenape, and that means ordinary or original people. and the Iroquois Indians of New York State called them grandfather. And that's one reason why we believe they were one of the first woodland tribes to settle here in this part of Pennsylvania many years ago. You'll also notice there's a garden there. Women did all the farming on a worldwide basis. These Indian women planted corn, pumpkin, squash, and bean seeds in the same mound of earth with a fish head for fertilizer. The corn grew first, the beans grew up the corn stalk, so that eliminated the need for bean poles. And they say that the squash and pumpkin plants, which have vines and big flat leaves that hang low to the ground, they say that discourage rabbits and animals from getting into their gardens. Anyway, over time, because they planted the same vegetables in the same plot of earth year after year, it would deplete the minerals in the soil. So today they kind of alternate crops. Years ago, when this occurred, they would pick up their village and relocate. That is why sometimes archaeologists find one village site right on top of another, because at some point in time another clan moved into that area. So I had mentioned Lenni Lenape being their own name for themselves. In the Lenni Lenape tribe, they had 3 different clans. Muncie was the wolf clan. Can you say that word?
Muncie.
Very good. You guys did good. So that's the Turkey clan. And then the Turtle clan was Unami. So they had the Muncie wolf clan, the Unikalachico Turkey clan, and the Unami, which was the Turtle clan. So when they would group together for different festivities, they married into different clans. Okay. Now here in the green display we have our pottery or Indian dishes. This is a Susquehanna Water Jug, and the marks around the top are indicative of the Muncie or the wolf clan. So when archaeologists find bits of pottery, that's a clue to them as to which clan lived in that area. The first piece that you see in the window was discovered 4 miles from the museum. It's been carbon dated, it's over 1,000 years old. And it's called Milo cord pottery. The woman who made that used a stick that was wrapped with cord to smooth the outside, and it left the imprint on the clay. That one we're lucky to have today. The second piece, we're very fortunate to have it intact. It was originally obtained in early 1700s by a local family, and they had lived in Shawnee on the Delaware years ago. Their last name was Tribal. They are from East Stroudsburg. And they passed that piece of pottery from generation to generation. So that's why I say we're so lucky to have that intact today. The little old gentleman was saving spare change in it before we got it. This piece is also Muncie pottery. The curator's wife tried to put this one back together, and she never could fit the rim around the top. So he tells everyone that the doctors finally gave the okay to let her out of the home any day now. But anyway, they used Elmer's glue to glue these pieces back together because it's water-based, soluble. If they put a piece in the wrong spot, they can always steam it to move it into a different spot. But she never could fit the rim around the top. I think they say you're always supposed to start at the top and go down. So these were made with the coiling method. The American Indian never invented a wheel. So without a potter's wheel, to make their pottery, they used the coiling method. This was done by digging a cone-shaped hole in the ground with a stick. Then they line in the hole in the ground with clay, like you line a pie tin with dough. At ground level, they would coil long, skinny loops of clay until they had it to the size and shape they were interested in. And when they had it to their liking, they'd smooth the outside with a wet stick, put their marks around the rim. They had to let it dry in the sun for 8 to 10 days. When it was completely dry, a very hot fire was built out of oak wood. Oak is very dense, it burns very hot. These pieces would then be pushed into the coals of the fire. Eventually they turn white from the heat. They would then remove them and let them cool, and when they wrapped them with their finger, if it gave a ring like chinaware, it was tempered and they could cook from it. If it gave a dull thudding sound, that meant it had cracked because there was a little moisture in it when they tried to fire it. They would usually just discard it. So as I said, the first piece is Milo cord pottery, and these 2 pieces are definitely from the Muncie clan or the Wolf clan. A long way today with its hybrid corn. The sad thing is, we have genetically engineered corn which grows fast during our short growing seasons, but then it attracts the monarch butterflies and it kills them. So it's, one against the other. But today, our hybrid corn is much larger than yesterday's Indian corn. And they also gathered acorns, butternuts, sunflower seeds, black walnuts, hickory nuts, any kind of wild berry, and we'll talk more about that in the 5th room. But I just basically want you to take notice of the size of the corn. Our agriculture has come a long way today with it. Softwood, and as they spun that dowel and it created the heat from the friction, they would add oxygen and bits of tinder like dry bark, moss, whatever they had that was very dry, something from a bird nest, and then that would create their fire. Or they would borrow from the neighbor a coal or something. That's a copperhead. It's very copper color. So snake skins kind of.
See the business.
The bathroom, I think they had a designated spot in the ground. That's a good question. Did everyone notice the Mr.? So his name is Meesing, and Meesing is spelled Meesing. Meesing spirit protected the animals of the forest and made sure that years ago, Native Americans living at opposite ends of the country had a belief in a creature which was similar, and they didn't even speak the same language. And in the West Coast, they had Bigfoot or Sasquatch. So haven't we always found fossils or remains dating back to the dinosaurs? Have they ever found a Bigfoot? It was really a Native American portrayed the Bigfoot, or Meesing. So when these natives here in the East were pushed on a westward migration, today, they have TV reality shows, they have, sightings of Bigfoot. It makes me think maybe it's a Native American sticking to customs and traditions from their past. Because we've discovered fossils and back to the dinosaurs, and they've never found a Bigfoot. Yeah. So his spirit was there. I kind of think it's like our Santa today, because sightings of the Meesing were either 2 times out of the year. So that's why I say maybe when these sightings of Bigfoot are made in the West, maybe it's just a Native American trying to stick to customs and traditions from their past. Now here in the yellow display we have the art of flint knapping, or methods of flaking. The arrow on the back wall is a Delaware Indian arrow. The shaft is made out of hickory. The tip on the end is called side-notched, unendoged chert, which is just another name, fancy name for New York State flint. The feather on the end, who knows what kind of a feather that is on the end of the arrow? Yeah? What kind of bird do you think it is? I'll give you a hint. Should I give you a hint?
Yeah.
November 25th, we all have it for dinner.
Turkey.
See, you guys did good. That's from the wing of a wild turkey feather. Do you know the curator had a group of Cub Scouts in here, and when he asked them what kind of a feather they thought that was, one of them thought it might have been a raccoon feather.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yes. In this area, the Native Americans used flint, jasper, and quartz to make their spear points and arrowheads. These 3 points are spear points, and the second 2 on the right are arrowheads. So if you're ever lucky enough to find a point, spear points are older than arrowheads. And you just need to do a little bit of research to identify if it was a spear point or arrowhead. They used hammer stones, indirect percussion and direct percussion to flatten their piece. And when they had it to their liking, the last step was pressure flaking, where they put buckskin in the palm of their hand so they did not cut themselves, and with an antler they would press and twist simultaneously. So at the same time they would press and twist. The Indians were wearing too? Yeah. Okay, use a different view from this side of the room.
फुडहरू छ रे यहाँ
I'm just going to stand right there. I always think I don't know if I'm going to remember everything nervous about. Well, one is used for foods and the other is used for plants. Oh, so here in the last room, we have plants that are used for foods and medicines. Lamb's quarters is actually wild spinach. They gathered blueberries, elderberries, chokeberries, blackberries, cranberries, strawberries, mulberries, gooseberries. They dried them and they stored them over the long, hard winter months when hunting was scarce. And they made dandelion spring tonic, which is probably like my grandmother's dandelion wine, but they call it a spring tonic. They added wild garlic to their venison. They made persimmons bread. They made flour from acorns, chestnuts, the Indian potato, corn, and they mixed all kinds of dried berries and nuts into their flour. So they had quite a variety there. They gathered black walnuts, butternuts, hickory nuts, amaranth was ground into flour as well. They made a tea from wintergreen, which cured kidney disorders. They knew how to make the medicine from the root of a cattail, which dissolved kidney stones. And they also, they made a tea from skunk cabbage to cure whooping cough. I've been told they would take the essence from a skunk and put it on the patient's chest. I kind of prefer to call him a victim, and I think that was to keep everyone else away from him. They would know that he was sick. And that probably really opened up his sinuses, I'm sure. They obtained vitamin C from the wild rose hips, and dwarf sumac was used to make a juice that tastes like cranberry juice. They call it Indian lemonade. Now there are different varieties of sumac. One of them is poisonous. It'll give you a rash. Now there's a picture of the last full-blooded Delaware Indian, Laura Thompson Dean. And there's also a picture of today's Chief Beeler. And then I'm going to ask for your attention here at the map, and I'll explain why there are no longer any groups of Native Americans. It's a sad story. It's a story that's true for many North American Indian tribes. These people were thrown from the Stone Age into modern technology. At the time, guns, liquor. They had no immunity to diseases which were coming over from Europe. It's so sad, and I hate to say it, but it was even a great colonial trick to give a Native American clothing or blanket that was worn by someone who had smallpox or measles. If one Native took the clothing or blanket back to the village, it infected the entire clan, and the colonists acquired more land that way. Now, I'm going to talk about how the Native Americans had no concept of owning land. To them, trying to own the land would be to try owning the air in this room. The earth was their mother, and they couldn't understand why the colonists wanted to fence off pieces of land and keep them from hunting there. So when William Penn came into the country, he was friendly with the Native Americans. He went back to Europe. His son, Thomas Penn, was here and wanted to move Native Americans off part of Pennsylvania so that he could bring colonists in. So what had happened was, the king owed the admiral a debt. The admiral was William Penn's father. The king gave him Penn's Woods in the New World. So William came over here. He went back to overseas. His sons came over and devised a treaty. And this was called the Walking Purchase Treaty of 1737. So at the time there were over 10,000 Delaware Indians living throughout the tri-state area. William Penn's son, Thomas Penn, devised a treaty that said the distance a man could walk in 1 day and a half would be one side of a parcel of land the Indians would give the colonists. And at the end of the walk, they were to take the line directly to the Delaware River. So the natives thought the maximum amount of property the colonists might acquire would be 25,000 acres. Instead of the 25,000 acres, the foot runner, Thomas Penn, hired 3 English foot runners. Edward Marshall was the lead runner that day. Marshall's Creek is named after him. He covered a distance of 65 miles, where Edward Marshall fell over in Jim Thorpe. Instead of taking the line directly to the Delaware River, they took the line parallel to the river, which meant they just acquired the entire upper Delaware Valley, and it added up to 500,000 acres. So all the natives that lived here were forced to burn their lodges and start a westward migration. There were over 300 different tribes living throughout the country then. The Delawares were a peaceful group of people. They started to intermarry with different Indian tribes. So today, we have less than 2,000 Delaware Indians of mixed blood living in Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Colorado, and southern Canada. But when we first opened our museum in 1976, there was just one full-blooded Delaware Indian left, and I have a picture of her under the bear hide. Her Indian name is Touching Leaves. Her English name is Nora Thompson Dean. She was the last full-blooded Delaware Indian, the last fluent speaker of the Lenape language, and unfortunately, she passed away in the early 80s. So when that occurred, that was the end of the Delaware line. There are no longer any full-blooded Delaware Indians, which is such a sad story because I truly believe there's still a lot we can learn from the Native Americans even today. You have any questions?
This is the gift shop.
This is the last one. There's this.
There. Good.
We have two stores in this.
이거 사는 거 있어요.
Is there a mow upstairs?
Yep. 실마 चाहिँ चाइनिज कुरा चाहिँ अन्त रेड इंडियन है क्यों अरे छैन रे नगएको उसो छ बिकज खतरा छ 3D रहेछ
My name is Taylor. I will be one of your trail guides out on the trail today. You will also have Miss Miranda and Gabby out there as well. So if you guys are intending help over out there, just feel free to shout. We are more than happy to help you guys. So when we get you guys on your horses, we're going to ask you to keep your feet out of the stirrups like mine are right now. You're going to throw them up on the horse's shoulders so we can adjust your stirrups for you. We want to make sure you guys are nice and comfortable on your ride. When you're done, you're going to put your foot back into the stirrup. The ball of your foot will sit on the stirrup. Heels down and toes up. It's going to keep you guys nice and balanced for the rest of your ride, okay? I don't want to see ballerinas. You guys are cowboys and cowgirls today. Heels down, toes up. After that, you guys are going to pick up your reins. There's a nice big knot in each set. You're going to make a fist right underneath that knot, and this is going to be your steering wheel for the rest of the ride. Our boys are very simple to steer. Pull left to go left, right to go right, and straight back to stop or slow down. So our boys do have reverse, so if you start yanking on their faces, they will start to back up. We do not need reverse on the trails. Our horses will bite each other in the butts if they get too close. So that being said, make sure you guys keep a good space in between, at least 3 to 4 feet at all times. There is no riding side by side, and there is no passing. You guys will stay single file while we are out there, and in the order we put you in, okay? All right. So while we are out there, our boys are not allowed to eat, no matter what they tell you. They will try to tell you they're allowed to eat. So make sure you keep your heads up, and give them a nice big kick to keep them moving and away from the grass. They eat twice a day, and it's more than enough for them. They are super overweight, and they eat hay all day. All right. You guys are allowed to. You're okay. You guys are allowed to bring your cell phones or cameras out there with you as well, but we ask that you keep the videotaping, the texting, the phone calls, tweeting, Facebooking, whatever. Don't do any of that.